Every gamer is familiar with fighting off zombies by now, and as long as they are alone, they're usually not much of a threat. If there are a few dozens at once, a bit more complicated. But what if there are even thousands of them? And that's where They Are Billions comes in, a strategy game where the name says it all. Well, we're not actually fighting billions at once, but who is going to count in such huge hordes anyways? The game was developed by Numantian Games, a Spanish studio that was already responsible for the RPG Lords of Xulima in 2014, which was only moderately successful. They Are Billions, on the other hand, had already become to somewhat of a phenomenon while being in early access in 2018. For me, the game only got really interesting in 2019, when they implemented the campaign at the full release. I've now played it in 2022 and 23, when the hype had long been gone already, and also the developers kinda went into hiding. But at least I can say that my review refers to the final version, which you will see exactly like that whether you play the game now or in 20 years, along with all its strengths and weaknesses, both of which we will take a closer look at now. The year is 2273. A virus has wreaked so much havoc that only one large city remains as the last bastion of humanity, while the rest of the previously overpopulated world is now occupied by dense swarms of zombies. In this also somewhat steampunk-inspired scenario, we are now sent out by the Emperor to build new outposts and push back the zombies one step at a time. And to build new outposts in the midst of zombie-infested areas and beating back swarms of zombies is also what could be considered the core of the game. As first step, we can now decide whether we want to play a campaign which spans several missions, where we build outposts after outposts with an overarching story and technology progression, or rather a standalone survival game, whose parameters we can set ourselves. We can play a map from the Steam Workshop, or the weekly challenge, where we can try to achieve a higher score than other players. While I have spent the majority of my over 200 hours of playtime with the campaign, we will first have a look at the game mechanics using the survival mode, and then I will tell you about what changes if you play the campaign instead. At the start of a new survival game, we can determine several parameters for our map. We can select in which environment we want to play in, but right at the start you will only have the very first option available, which you will first need to win in order to unlock the second environment, which is then needed for the third one, and so on. However, unlocking only works if we meet the difficulty minimum, and we can set that one by two parameters: the amount of zombies that are on the map right at the start and the game duration. The shorter the game, the less time we have to prepare for the same amount of zombie swarms. And off we go into the randomly generated map. As soon as the game finished loading, we should press the pause button to take a look at the initial situation and plan the first steps. We start with a few combat units, which we should immediately send out to explore the surrounding area. Controlling the units is following the typical convention of RTS games. The pathfinding isn't the highlight though. The Command & Conquer harvesters send their regards. We also have a command center, which provides food and shelter for the first inhabitants and enough power to supply the first additional buildings. And we should also start to plan them right away. As long as we have some remaining food and power, we can build new dwellings for additional residents, which we can then use as workers or train as military units. After a few buildings, however, we will run out of gold and have to wait for tax revenues. A timer for that is shown at the command center. So now it's time to hit the space key to unpause the game. Our units will discover some locations which we will later use for our stone and ore quarries, and of course they will find a whole lot of zombies, and possibly even infected houses which spawn an endless stream of zombies until they are destroyed at some point. We should be aware that whatever we see in the front row is far from being all the zombies, and if we start shooting at the zombies we might attract more zombies, and among them much stronger ones. How many zombies we attract also depends on who we attack with. The fleet-footed archers don't do much damage, but are almost silent. All other units, including the soldier, make a whole lot of noise. If you accidentally attract zombies with them, it can quickly lead to a premature ending. While the game is only lost when the command center gets infected, this can happen very quickly once the zombies reach the settlement. Each building has a small protective wall, and once that is down, the building is getting infected. And this will not only shut it down, but the former inhabitants will show up as zombies and will attack other buildings. And this quickly becomes a chain reaction, which gets extremely difficult to contain, especially since infected buildings cause further noise and thus attract even more zombies from further away. They Are Billions also doesn't allow for free saving. Instead, it automatically keeps overwriting the same save game for that level. This means that you can leave the game and continue playing the next day, which is also really necessary for maps which can take 5 to 10 hours, but you can't go back to a previous save game if you screwed anything up. In that regard, the game is rather merciless, and you will have to live with the consequences of every mistake you make. If you don't just perish, that is. Personally, I like this limitation as it makes the game much more tense. There are a few issues with that in the campaign mode, but I will get back to that later. Back to the base. We have now received the first tax revenues or perhaps collected some gold through exploration and can continue giving some more building orders. With new dwellings we will reach the limit of what our food can sustain. At the start we can decide whether we want to build hunting lodges or fishing huts to get some new food needed for additional residents. By the way, if we place a building incorrectly, that's not a big deal as long as we have not left the pause mode. As long as the construction didn't actually start, the planned building can be removed without any losses. All in all, planning buildings is very easy here. The game offers a good interface and a sufficient overview. The construction happens automatically after leaving the pause. Thus, a construction worker does not have to run there first. We also need wood for most of the buildings though, so we need a woodcutter's hut on the edge of a forest. However, this could be outside of the range of our command center's power supply. In that case, we can expand the range by building Tesla coils. With enough wood, we are also going to build a quarry to get stone. And with wood and stone, we can finally build the barracks. We need to train new combat units, and these will be needed to clear additional space on the map, as well as to defend against small groups of attacking zombies. But at some point, the first big wave of zombies will arrive, and if we want to survive the wave, we are going to need walls and ideally also some turrets or towers on which we can put our units. But before we can build any turrets, we first need to build a sawmill, which can then be used to research the stonemason in addition to wooden structures. The stonemason can then research proper turrets. In addition, we will need new sources of energy, and our population will require so much food that we should build farms. The tent dwellings can then be upgraded to wooden houses and then stone houses, which allow for more inhabitants. User food and tax gains can then also be optimized by constructing buildings like the marketplace in their vicinity. Shortly before the zombie wave arrives at the day we can see in the bottom left corner of the screen, it will also be announced, and we are also being informed from which direction the stream of zombies will start to flow towards our base. Time to order some last construction jobs and to align the units accordingly, and then we need to hope that our defense will be sufficient. Of course, these waves will get progressively more difficult, and they will no longer be limited to just come from one direction. So it's an ongoing battle against time where you have to constantly weigh up whether you want to put resources into units to clear the map, expand the base and make yourself more vulnerable doing so, or whether you'd rather raise walls and towers to fend off the approaching attack. If you put too much emphasis on defense in the beginning, you may be able to fend off the first wave, but then you run into problems with the second one. And these waves will become extremely massive towards the end, with several thousands of zombies streaming towards the base at the same time. And then you got the other types of zombies like fast harpies that can jump over walls and venoms that can spit acid. And of course it's also fun to watch this battle. In terms of graphics and readability as well as atmosphere, Numantian has done a great job. As far as performance is concerned, the game runs great for the most part, but there are two exceptions. Firstly, when thousands of zombies pile up, for example because you put a thick wall in their way but no towers to mow them down adequately. And secondly, at the start of some campaign maps on the highest difficulty level, when at first multiple zombies stand inside each other in thousands of cases and the game is trying to spread them out. This doesn't cause any stutter, but all actions in the game basically run in slow motion for the first minutes. Finally, we are coming back to the campaign and the differences to the survival game. The campaign has a rudimentary story, which is presented via an intro and a few cutscenes, but also mission descriptions and some newspaper snippets you can find in missions. However, you shouldn't expect much here. It's more compulsory work, but well, it's nice that it's there at all. So how does the campaign differ in regards to the gameplay? First of all, even in the campaign you can't freely save during a mission, and instead the game saves automatically. If you lose a mission, it is being counted as failed. You can try it again, but then your score would take a hit, which for example you would need for a Steam achievement. However, you can create backup saves while being on the campaign map in between two missions. And in case you lose, you can just load the save. At this point, this save will then be actively used to save any additional progress, so that you should think of making another backup save. Quite a ridiculous system in my opinion. At the start of the campaign, we also have to choose one out of two possible main characters to play in the upcoming solo missions, because besides of the normal missions, which are similar to the survival game, the campaign additionally contains solo missions and battles against zombie swarms, which I will get back to in a moment. In the solo missions, you do exactly what you might expect. You run around with your single character shooting zombies. You have to reach some mission goal, and you should also collect items along the way, which will earn you research points and empire points, which are needed for the other mission type. And collecting these points is also one of the two problems which I got with these solo missions. To find all the items on the map is just a pixel hunt, which really isn't much fun. My second complaint is the length of the missions and their lack of challenge. It's possible that you run back and forth for an hour and kill zombies and then step on a mine, die, and then have to do the whole running around for an hour again. I would call the solo missions the most annoying part of the whole game. Fortunately, they only make up about 10% of the campaign's playtime, but I could really have done without them. Sure, you can adjust the difficulty for each level in the campaign separately, but that's beside the point, and I won't do that on principle alone. The zombie swarm missions are also one of those things that the developer can't really have thought through completely. In these missions we first buy an army with our empire points, then we start the game and let the zombies pour in on us. If all goes well, we win. If not, we'll have to try again later. There's no tactical skill involved or anything like that. And the battles take ages to complete, since you can't speed them up either. Thankfully, you can just go AFK for the half an hour or more that they take. However, the main part in the campaign is also the normal missions, where you build your base, like in the survival mode. And in the campaign, these missions are accompanied by an overarching tech tree, which you will keep researching mission by mission. There are passive bonuses, new units, new buildings, additional units at the start of the mission, and you can also upgrade the train, which then periodically brings you resources every time it arrives. The tech tree is very well done in my opinion, and offers interesting choices from the beginning to the end of the campaign. The missions themselves each have a slightly different spin in the campaign. You always have to build up the settlement, but you might need to eliminate a city of the undead in one map, a huge harpy nest in another, or you just need to create a huge settlement to fend off a single massive wave at the very end. Besides of that, the missions work mostly as in the survival game, with the difference of the before mentioned train, which is present in every map. While in the survival game, new residents immediately move into their houses, in the campaign you first have to wait until they are brought by the next train. The maps are somewhat different from each other due to the conditions and environment of the mission, and they are also not balanced very consistently. But of course you have to keep in mind that that's also not possible to 100%, as it's your decision what you unlocked in the research tree so far, and you also have a bit of a choice on which mission you do next. And even though there are certainly missions that were less enjoyable than others, these base building missions for the most part were tons of fun for me. And that was, after all, about 200 hours of the 230-hour long campaign. Of course you can have it much faster with fewer failed attempts on a lower difficulty level, but you can definitely say that the campaign offers quite a bit to do. And that brings us to the conclusion. Overall, They Are Billions is a game that is absolutely bug-free, but still has some edges in terms of design and balancing. This applies almost exclusively to the campaign, but I also see the campaign as a major part of the game. The construction of your settlement and its defenses, together with a constant stream of decisions on how to proceed, is just a lot of fun for quite a long while. Even if you get overwhelmed by the zombie swarm after 7 hours and need to start all over again. I can recommend They Are Billions to all players who have fun with such kind of challenges, and to those who just like to build their base in order to see huge amounts of zombies get shredded by your defenses, which of course would be much more relaxing if you played on lower difficulties. I rate the campaign and the game as a whole with a full thumbs up despite of the weak points. The standard price for the game is still €30 as of today, or $30 US. If you're skeptical or uninterested in the campaign and think it's a bit much, you can wait for a sale, though it has rarely been discounted for more than 25% so far. So much for They Are Billions. I hope I've been able to give you a good overview of the game with this review, and if so, then I'd appreciate if you leave a like or subscribe to the channel. I thank you for watching, say goodbye, and... oh, who's knocking? I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye.
The walls are under attack. They are infecting our buildings. They are trying to break through.